In fact, I can recall back to a day 3 or 4 years ago when I was at a meeting in downtown New Bedford that Dana Ribeiro, who was then a city councilor, was running, and it dealt with gentrification in the city of New Bedford. We'll get into that in just a bit. First, good morning, welcome back. Glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me, I appreciate it.
No problem at all. So, you had a rally on Thursday, basically trying to get your followers to chant enough to convince the city councilors, or at least 8 of them, to override Mayor Mitchell's veto, in particular of the rent stabilization. And I'm not going to really get into the other 2, that could be for another time. But did you expect the vote to turn out the way that it did, or were you thinking, well, look, it had such a favorable outcome the first time around, of course they're going to pass this, override it?
Uncertain. Was uncertain of what the outcome would be, based upon some of the councilors' statements since that time. So there was an uncertainty, and the point of the rally was we're hearing from renters in the city and folks in the city that are experiencing their rent going up on streets like Austin Street from 1,000 to 1,900 over a month.
God, I wish I could do that. I used to have a property on Austin Street.
Yeah, so dramatic rent increases, people living in their cars. So the goal of the rally was to mobilize folks to actually share their stories, and also to show that there's support and why there is support for a non-binding question.
So tell me, before we get into the question, what did the people, you mentioned folks living in cars, whatnot, what are they saying? What did they have to say?
People were really floored at the idea that there was a attempt to suppress a vote for a non-binding question. That was something that was upsetting to some of the folks. Just the fact that these elected officials are elected to basically represent the voice of the people, and in their positions, the mayor and the 5 councilors that have voted against it, that there was an attempt to silence that and limit that democracy. And that was something that was really resonated with a lot of folks. And then overall, just the need for some kind of renter protection based on what's happening in our community, the unlivability for many people, and the stresses that that price gouging is having on families and individuals living in the city.
Would you agree with me that price gouging is happening everywhere? Certainly rental prices are going up, but so are utilities, groceries, gasoline, everywhere we look. Is it easy to pick on landlords in this particular case?
I don't want to use the word landlords. I don't think that word is a loaded word, and it comes from a history that's harmful and led to an American Revolution and a revolution in Europe as well. Property owners. So could you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
So you want to call them property owners? The question is. The question is what? You made me forget.
I'm sorry.
No, but I was mentioning how prices have gone up with groceries, gasoline, utilities, and prices have gone up everywhere. And then I turned around. Isn't it easy to pick on the landlords, a term you don't want to use, property owners or whomever?
I think what we see is easy. It's easy for property owners to price gouge their rental rates. It's not easy for those that are impacted by that reality. And I think that one of the things you had said was that this is happening everywhere. But what's unique is in New Bedford we have one of the highest eviction rates in the state. Coming out of the pandemic, I think we were the 3rd highest in the state. We also had the highest rent increases in 2022. So yes, there is an issue happening throughout the nation and throughout the state. However, we're also in a situation where New Bedford is seeing a disparity where it's even more increased in New Bedford. So New Bedford, like when you go into the ER, you treat the ER based on the triage system, like those in the most impact, you focus on your attention on that. So it is something that's really important to focus on, and I think that it's really easy unfortunately for folks to come in to raise the rent $900, $700, $500 overnight, and to force people out of there through economic means, people that were up to date on their rent to all of a sudden be in a situation where they're facing homelessness. That's where it's never easy for folks to face that. That's a difficult reality for folks to face. So I think that's where we should be looking at, is how those folks are impacted, and it's very easy for those that have economic power to change the dynamics of our community overnight.
So we're talking to Erik Andrade, and we're going to open up the phone lines at 508-996-0500. The non-binding referendum was pretty much an open slate. So there was nothing there except basically a question that said, would you like to see an ordinance that would come together to displace? There was no ordinance in itself. So people would be voting on letting the city council or whatever boards are put together draw up some type of plan.
I think that it would have just the actual order. The question was, should the city of New Bedford adopt an ordinance stabilizing rents to prevent displacement in the local housing market? And what would happen is that, the citizens of New Bedford, the constituents of New Bedford, in November would be able to voice their opinion upon that issue. Now, whatever that outcome of that election would be, would signify what the voice of the people in New Bedford is, their desires. That would signify to the state representatives, to the governor, to the mayor, city councilors, where the will of the people is. And from that will of the people, then collectively, property owners, constituents, and all bodies that are interested would come together, and there would be the drafting of an ordinance that meets the needs of all those folks, so that you have to take into consideration all stakeholders, and most in particular those most impacted. And that question would signify to the elected leadership of our state, our Commonwealth, that has this issue before them yearly at the State House. There's been bills for going back to 1997.
And there are two that we talked about the other day that are up there right now that are probably not going to go anywhere, because if you look at the number of state senators and state reps that are property owners compared to those that are renters, are they, it's self-preservation at some particular time.
I don't know if it's self-preservation, because I would say it's greed. Because
how can you say that?
Because there's regulations on many things in our society, and those businesses still are able to be successful with regulations. We're not talking about folks being businesses being priced out so that they can't be in business. We're talking about reasonable, fair, equitable increases. We're talking about preventing unequitable, unfair, unreasonable rent increases. You can still make a profit reasonably.
How do you know? Unless you're looking at each individual's books, how would you know that?
How would you know that you can make business being reasonable?
Make a profit being
reasonable?
Yeah.
Because there's...
How do you know what reasonable is without looking at their books?
Well, each individual profit margin that you need to, as long as you're making a profit, what is the profit that you need to be making? Like, what are you defining?
Who knows? How much is somebody's kid for braces or college? Who knows what that profit needs to be?
And what does it need to be for the people that they're making profit off of? So it's a balancing equation.
I guess people can move. I mean, I've moved before. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you have at a particular time, whether we didn't like the style of the apartment, we didn't think it was worth the amount of money that the person wanted for the rent. That happens all the time.
Agreed.
So,
But when you're in a situation where what we're seeing in our community is that there's rent speculators coming in, purchasing houses at a massive rate from all over, and as soon as they're moving in, they're raising the rent dramatically. $900 increase in a rent in a month is a dramatic increase.
That's a new landlord. And part of me is saying, without knowing each individual case, new landlord comes in, property manager, redoes the building.
They're not redoing the building. That's the other thing. Many of the apartments are remaining the same. There's a relative of mine that informed me that a development group came in. They bought a property. They increased the rent right before Christmas, $500. Nothing was changed in the space at all.
I would say that's bad. I don't know the situation, but at the other side of the coin is you've got somebody that's just bought the building, so their costs are going to be higher because it costs more to buy the building than the previous owner who had the building. 9 out of 10 times. So I hear this is going to lead to a bigger question that you and I think are going to want to tackle. You're up for taking some calls, right?
Yes, sir.
508-996-0500. Good morning. You're first up with Erik Andrade.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
I understand, your point.
Whose point?
Both points that you're going back and forth. But I tend to see Brian's side more, and I'll tell you why. No one has the right to tell someone else how to run their life or how to run their household. And when they buy a property, it's their home. What you're talking about is happening to my family members. And you know what they did? They just took a second job. And they're thinking about moving out of state. So no one has the right to tell someone else how to run their business or their home. This is the cold fact, and the truth sometimes hurts. No one's responsible for your lifestyle except yourself. The only thing that this country gives you is the freedom not to know when to hinder you from you getting your financial freedom, your independent freedom, or anything else that you want to accomplish in your life. Everything else is up to you. So it frustrates me how everyone else is responsible for someone else. No, you're responsible for yourself and for your family.
Okay. Erik, you want to answer?
That's his perspective. I disagree. I feel like we have a responsibility and accountability to our environment. We have a responsibility to our community. We have a responsibility to our state. We have a responsibility to our city. We have a responsibility to the world, in my opinion. And in regards to regulations on rent, we have regulations on trains, or we did. And when we removed those regulations on those trains, what happened? We have East Palestine.
Was that because the regulations were relaxed, or was it because there was an accident?
I think it's a both and.
Well, I'd like to see what the final results are going to be on that. But I hear what you're saying. You're not the only person that has stated, well, because of the lax regulations, look what happened, in East Palestine.
Mm-hmm. So, we could look at other industries. We could look at the housing industry in 2008 and what happened when there was relaxed regulations within that. Within our society, whether it's in education, whether it's in the hospital, whatever business you're in, there's regulations typically. And, if you're looking to be, we're not talking about just homeowners. When the gentleman mentioned homeowners, we're talking about people who are in the business of taking property and renting that property out. And what we're saying is that we're not asking anybody to be responsible for anybody. We're asking for reasonable, fair, and equitable increases in that rent that they're charging for that property that they're renting out as a business. They're profiting off of people paying that rent. And like the gentleman said, people can take multiple jobs. The relative that I spoke to has 3 jobs right now as an elder at 61 years old, and sleeps on average 3 hours during the day. So, we may take the attitude, some may take the attitude that the individualism is all that's important, that your individual needs of you and your family are all that matters. I follow different philosophy. I believe that we're responsible for each other. I think that the teachings of Jesus Christ, I think the teachings of Buddha all kind of resonate with me.
508-996-0500. Erik Andrade in studio. He's going to be with me for the entire hour. We do have an update coming your way in just a bit, but you know how it goes. If I don't pay the bills, then I can't pay my bills, never mind the rent.
Back to Brian's Beat. Join the show by calling 508-996-0500. New Bedford's news talk station.
We're going to be talking about gentrification and rent stabilization during the second hour of, this is the second hour, the second half hour, but I want to take a call before we go into the news. Hello.
Good morning, gentlemen. This is
Good morning.
Camacho from New Bedford, Ward 5. I just want to say that I think we have to wake up. I think our democracy is at risk here. I mean, you have a beautiful city, a gateway city. We get funding due to our makeup. And I feel like, the voice of our people need to be heard. Just in my community alone, I've noticed that, there have been empty houses, families coming in and out. When I moved here back home 4 years ago, my community was basically, it was cultural. It was live. You wake up in the morning, you see people coming in from the bakery, grabbing their breads, speaking Creole, speaking Spanish. And, the makeup has definitely changed. There's families on my street that are experiencing what Erik was stating. The family downstairs from me, there's 5 adults living in a home, 2 bedrooms. I mean, we have to do something, Even May Wu knew what she was doing, when she put her limitations on. But, if there's not going to, if this can't be passed, there needs to be some sort of budget appropriation for rental assistance. The people are hurting, and if our city councilors can't hear the cries, then we need to do what we need to do to get them out of there, get some new blood in there, and really help the people. We elect these officials, and it's unfortunate, the state that we're in. And, my heart goes out to everybody. We're all struggling. Something has to be done. But thank you, Erik.
Thank you very much. And Erik, I'm going to let you respond when we come back after our update. Welcome back to Brian's Beat. Erik Andrade giving us the tenants' viewpoint about this whole override failure that took place on Thursday evening. 508-996-0500. Erik, what I'd like you to do is, there was no time before the news for you to respond to the previous caller, so go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to thank Raina Camacho for her words, but also she ran for office for Ward 5 before, and hopefully we can get her to run again, because as she said, Scott Lima and Brad Markey, Ian Abreu, Shawn Oliver,
Naomi Carney.
And Naomi Carney voted to suppress democracy, denying the residents the opportunity to vote on a non-binding question. That's a lack of leadership, in my opinion, and a disregard for the concerns of the community. Scott Lima cited that he had heard conversations with the mayor and developers and property owners, and that was one of the things he was quoted in National Public Radio as the thing that changed his direction. And because they were not going to have the resources to renovate or do new construction. And to me, that just shows the lack of leadership on his part. He wasn't talking about the actual constituents that voted him into office or the concerns of the people. He was talking about developers and property owners and a conversation with the mayor. So that disregard for the community, and in particular, it's troubling that they silenced a non-binding question that would seek to get the voice of the people. Councilors should recognize the importance.
Maybe we should talk about the fact that there was a non-binding question in the first place instead of a binding question with some kind of teeth in it.
So it's better to, figure out exactly where you're at. And politically, I think it was a wise move by Shane Burgo to put that question in that way. Because, binding, you want to have the actual plan developed at that point in time. So this would just basically get a assessment of where the community, the constituents of the city would want to be. But instead of allowing democracy to work, those that seek to silence democracy tend to be, that tends to be, to me, in my mind, a dictatorial leadership style. Like, this is a non-binding question that allows the community to exercise democracy and voice their opinion. And instead of allowing the community to do that with fear, and their logic and their reasoning was that basically that by having a non-binding question, their fear was that the rents would go up. There is no evidence of ever a non-binding question around this issue ever raising the rents.
I would agree with you that, you know, when you look at it that way, be that specific. But it's like the stock market. You know, it runs on emotion. Just the mere thought, and I can speak from being a landlord, wouldn't think twice about raising those rents, knowing that somewhere down the road there's a possibility that some type of stabilization is going to come in, because that stabilization goes from the point of what that rent is at that particular time. So yeah, you're going to try to, it is preservation.
Preservation means that you're at risk. Preservation, a non-binding question is not threatening your preservation.
It's leading to that.
So currently, your rents, if you're a property owner, your rents are paying likely your mortgage. If you have a mortgage on the home still, they're participating in your taxes, and there's a surplus.
That's what you hope.
So you designed your property rental numbers, correct?
Correct.
So you've created them. You looked at your books and you created them based on a profit margin.
You base them on the knowledge that you have at that particular time. I think we can all agree, never mind all the different things that are going on with the commuter rail and offshore wind, those things. The economy of the United States has drastically changed. I was saying it was happening before the crisis called pandemic, but certainly since that. So people's books are in a shambles right now. So things have changed.
And I just think that in that, the fear of a non-binding question, getting the folks in a community to have their voice based on reasoning that isn't validated by any facts.
Landlords raise rents all the time when they think that there is going to be something coming down the road that is going to eat at their profit.
So statistically, the highest rent increases have happened in Boston when there was no rent control. Statistically.
Correct. Yeah.
So,
but that's different.
The stats across the country show that one of the things they say is that it will prevent development. They're in Seattle during the years of their highest development, the highest amount of development. They also saw the highest rent increases. And communities where they say that rent stabilization is applied, they say that there's development shortage. That's not true. In Oakland, when they had rent stabilization, they had some of the highest development years. So
they have one of the highest homeless rates right now.
And that's because there was a gutting of some in San Francisco and some of those places. There was a gutting of the stabilization bills through something that was called a vacancy. I forget the term of it, but it was basically allows when someone moves out of an apartment. So people get married, people go to college, people get a job in a different area. As soon as they move out, they can now put that apartment on market rate. So there's been a limitation of the number of spaces in that community that are actually renter protected.
I don't know all of the X's and O's of what's going on in California anymore because I'm not there. I would say this, and New York City is living this right now. with their rent controls, they are losing people. The city of Boston is going to get ready to go through a loss of people. And a lot of those folks are going to start heading down this way. And I think part of what you are out there pleading for, or the folks you are pleading for, are those that have lived in the community for a long time. Now, you're born and raised here, correct?
No, I'm not.
No?
No. My family is from Fox Point in Providence, Rhode Island, which is a community, a Cape Verdean community, similar to New Bedford. And that community was gentrified dramatically. 195 was built through the community. RISD, Brown University, and others started speculatively buying up the properties and pricing the families out. And so what does that area look like now? It doesn't look like Fox Point anymore.
It doesn't look like a residential neighborhood? Is that what you mean?
It's the dynamics, like Raina was talking about, of the community have dramatically shifted. You have a lot of yoga studios. You have a Trader Joe's. You have, a lot of different shops, boutique shops, and you have a lot of folks with significant affluence that have moved into the community, and it's changed dramatically. So
I'm glad you went down this road, because I do believe that gentrification is underway in the city of New Bedford. And I think many people that live around here, certainly those that I've spoken to, they want to see the city upgraded. They see dilapidated buildings, whether folks are living in them or not. They see old schools, old churches, whatnot. And they want folks to come in to New Bedford. But in order for New Bedford to upgrade, there's that weed and seed process. And what I mean by weeding is that those that can't keep up with the Joneses, so to speak, they're going to be weeded out. And new people will come in, but there's a chance also for the people that are currently here to upgrade themselves along with the city. And I think that's the kind of gentrification that many people want. I don't know if that's going to be the end result.
Yeah, I think that gentrification has been happening for a long time in the city. Like, you could just look at the Route 18 as an example of that. Route 18 displaced 2,000 people, predominantly Cape Verdean community, based on the organization WHALE, the Old Dartmouth Historical Society, the owners of the Whaling Museum, had the Route 18 project redirected from County Street to South Water Street, displacing the low-income community, immigrant community, African community. And then also in the 70s with the eminent domain that was done in the West End, displacing families and taking away home ownership and putting property in the hands of, now in the hands of organizations like Peabody, that now are managing the land instead of the people having that land. And that land, prior to the Great Depression, was owned by African and Caribbean families that owned the homes. But during the Great Depression, the mortgages, the banking system collapsed and people lost the ownership of their homes. And then outside tenants, outside property owners owned a lot of the property, and they didn't upkeep the property. And, the civil unrest led to the ability for the government to do eminent domain, displacing families and stuff like that. So that's an act of gentrification, and this has been happening for a long time. And displacement from land is an act of genocide, and that's one of the concerns. Is that you can the upgrading of a community can happen without the displacement of people. Like, you can.
How do you do it?
You invest in the people. You invest in the people, and you allow them the opportunity to develop their spaces.
I can't the people invest in themselves?
Yes, they can when they have the capacity to do so.
And they don't now. That's a question.
That's a question. They can, but I think that we as a society, when we look at the disparities that are happening in our community and the histories, then you have to look at the reality of like how some people can invest. There's some families from the Old Dartmouth Historical Society, those old families, they can build newspapers. They can do all kind of stuff with the wealth that they've acquired through generational wealth that has come at the expense of people that were exploited. And many of the families from New Bedford are those families that historically have been exploited by those that have built their capital off the exploitation of labor of other folks for generations and generations and generations. And I think that reparations are in order for those folks that were displaced in the 70s and the 60s, and those folks that were exploited in this community generationally. And I think that investing in our educational and opportunities in our community, those type of things, investing instead of having subsidies going into large developers, invested in first-time home buyer opportunities. Communities that have the deepest roots, like ecosystem that have the deepest roots, are the healthiest environments. The deeper the roots, the less soil erosion you have. The environment overall, and I believe the same is true of people in communities, that the deeper the roots in a community, the healthier a community is. So you can support the development of a community at the same time upgrading the community in itself. By investing in the people in our community, we can grow together. What we're seeing is right now is that it's fast tracking those that have economic power and influence are able to basically rewrite the game, and it's like a game of Monopoly. Who has boardwalk and all the property, and where do the people go when they can't afford to pay the rent?
That is going to be the question, because
I think
that's
Monopoly
going to
tells
happen.
you. I think Monopoly tells you. I think you're going to see.
They end up out of the game.
They end up out of the game. You can't pay the rent, you go to jail.
No.
And the game.
That has never happened.
And the
Not
game.
in the game.
No,
you end up going to jail when you land on go to jail, or you get one of the cards that tells you to go to jail. Not for landing up. If you can't pay the rent, you end up out of the game.
Yeah.
Let's take a couple of calls here. 508-996-0500. Thank you for your patience. You're on with Erik Andrade. Hello? 1, 2. You there? All right. Try another one then. Hello? I guess let's just blame Brian for this. Hello?
Hey, I'm here.
Good.
Good morning. How are you?
I am. Yourself? You're on with Erik.
I'm doing okay. We're listening to this and we're talking, my son and I, about the deeper meaning behind these things. I mean, it bothers me that everything boils down to race with what you guys are talking about, because it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with race. There are a lot of people that got displaced by Route 18, not just the minority community. So you say people. So when we're listening to the conversation that you guys are having, when the term "we" comes out and the community, it's easy, it's very obvious to pinpoint what "we" means and what the community means. And it's a race, looking at things strictly through a racial lens. And that's kind of unfair. And I would say with rent stabilization, buy a house or, go somewhere else and live that life and see if you can afford to charge what you wish landlords were charging now. Because I think that, jealousy plays a part in it. Yeah, it sucks not having what other people have. But there's also a motivating factor there to go get work for what other people have worked for, to get to where they are in life, in owning a home or owning several homes. We're all free to do it. That's all I've got to say. Erik, you have a good day, and just think about what I'm saying, man.
Thank you for your call, Erik.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's more than just race. And when I'm saying we, I'm talking about the community of New Bedford. I'm talking about elders. I'm talking about low-income families. I'm talking about working-class families. I'm talking about immigrant community. I'm talking about those with disabilities. I'm talking about those that are in a situation where they're being forced out of their community. And in regards to the reality, I think that there's also canaries in the mine. Like in a mine, they would use canaries, and the impacts of poison gases would impact the canaries first. And what we see with marginalized communities, those communities, and we live in a society, race is a social construct. Race is not a reality except for it's created socially, but the reality is in that social construct that's been created, some communities bear the brunt of that creation, of that negative impact that happens with racialized institutional racism. And that reality is impacting communities where they live, and those communities have been impacted by decisions that are made that are beyond their control. In regards to jealousy, it's not about jealousy, it's about empathy and looking at the impact that's happening to people you care about.
508-996-0500. One small segment with Erik coming up.
Brian's Beat. Join the show by calling 508-996-0500.
Who's there? Welcome back. One small segment with Erik. I guess we should ask, now that the override failed, what's the next move by you and the people that you're representing, for lack of a better term?
I think the next move is to continue to organize, to continue to educate. I think also, moreover, is based on the actions of the mayor, Scott Lima, Shawn Oliver, Ian Abreu, Brad Markey, and Naomi Carney. It illustrates the need to support and find candidates that are going to run and actually respect the voice of the people. And
so are you saying that they should be voted out?
Bill Carmel, former NAACP director and a builder of low-income housing throughout the state, but in particular throughout New Bedford, philanthropist, architect, and he's 91 years old. Actually, he's older than 91. He is a World War II era vet, a Korean War vet. He came out. He was one of the first people that came to the rally on Thursday night. And prior to the rally and that night, he talked about, the folks that do not support the people's voice and suppress the people's voice need to be voted out of office. And
you agree?
I agree with them. I agree. Those that represent crony capitalism, as you said, that are listening to the voice of developers and real estate speculators, and those folks are not willing to allow the people to voice and exercise democracy, don't belong in that seat.
All right. Hey, thank you for coming in studio today. I really appreciate it. I know it was short notice, but you answered the clarion call. How does that sound?
I appreciate greatly you taking the opportunity to reach out to me and allow me the space to share with the community.
I'm going to say this again, and I've got very few moments left. On this particular issue, we're on different sides of the track. But, Erik, I really appreciate the fact that you get off your butt and get out there and try to do something. And I think those that live in the city of New Bedford should be very, very grateful for somebody like yourself.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate the fact that we have to have discourse. That's one of the most important things we have to have. We only find common ground through discourse. So I appreciate you taking that time to do that.
No problem. Ken's up next. I got to get out of here. Adios, amigo.